Congressman Gosar, thank you so much for joining PJNET Radio this morning. We've heard about your visit to the Bundy Ranch, and we just want to take a moment to, one, salute and applaud you for your personal involvement in the Bundy Ranch standoff. So when you were there, you were on the side that was looking at the muzzle of the sniper rifles?
Well, by the time we got there, Mark, things had, cooler heads had prevailed, and we had seen the exit of most of the government enforcement group. So what we came about was a community gathering on behalf of the family of Bundys. People were actually eating, they were talking, they were rallying. A de-escalation by the time we got there. But we actually did see the compounds that the government actually brought in. I mean, the show of force was just unheralded.
Okay. Well, we applaud you, Congressman. I'm going to read you a quote and ask if you know who the author of that quote is. Here's the quote. "I will not stand for these type of infringements and call on the BLM to respect the basic rights of American citizens and not use totalitarian tactics like this again when trying to resolve public land disputes." Do you know who said that?
I wouldn't take a gander, but there's a lot of people that should be saying it.
Okay. Well,
who was it, by the way?
It was you, Congressman. You put that. That was one segment
of
a large article on that you posted on Facebook. But a thing that struck me as interesting and notable is you're a congressman of Arizona, and your district adjoins the area in Nevada. But what inspired you to leave your district and go join and find out about the Bundy Ranch standoff?
Well, we had been invited to speak in Vegas to a number of groups from the Mojave County mortgage companies. And so when we were there, we said, "Listen, we're so close. Let's go see what's transpiring." And being on the Natural Resources Committee and seeing the plight of Western states, particularly with the public lands issue, which is supposed to be multiple use and help generate revenue to the states, we decided to go on up. And so I looked like I was a bird out of water, being in a suit. But that's how I was dressed. But they welcomed me anyway.
Have you had a chance to get any feedback from your constituents?
Absolutely. One of the big things that we've got is we got a problem in Western states in regards to the jurisdiction and the use of federal and public lands. And so this is an issue that is a rallying cry along all Western states. It was taken on behalf of the federal government. It was supposed to be multiple use. And what we see is the federal government slowly, and in some cases very quickly, shutting down the access for the average citizen in preclusions for special interest groups like environmental groups, withdrawals like presidential decrees, as well as special interest groups like solar and wind and opportunities that special interest groups would take. So they were very happy that I went there. Cooler heads prevailed. That's what we were asking for. And what we also said was this is an illicit response from the federal government to a individual when equal application of the law hasn't been seen to groups like the eco-terrorist groups, some of the environmental groups, as well as the Occupy Wall Street movement.
Well, Congressman, is it ever legitimate, in your view, for the federal government to use police power to collect even a legitimate debt?
I think there's got to be a rational way and a civil way in which to do that. I mean, I think there's better ways to show it than what was utilized in this case, Mark. We actually saw a paramilitary type application in forces. We counted over 40 vehicles from the BLM and Park Service that was built to come in and forcibly extricate the Bundys and their cattle. That's wrong. I think there's a better way of handling that to allow cooler heads to prevail. It doesn't say that rightful debt isn't not acceptable. We're not taking a side on what the Bundys we may owe and probably do owe. I think that's a discussion for the public with all the facts, put out for everybody to make that decision if we're going to be asked to be a jury.
Understood. Congressman, one thing that inflamed the grassroots community, and it should inflame all Americans, is there any such thing as a, quote, First Amendment zone?
My understanding is that there is supposed to be a First Amendment to everywhere we are at. I think that some business owners have tried to relegate that to a certain spot based on their property. But in public lands, I feel that should be anywhere and everywhere. And it's from what I've seen in the interpretation of the law. That's been allowed to perpetrate from groups like environmental groups to even MoveOn.org and Occupy Wall Street.
Speaking of public lands, one of the larger concerns is the vast ownership of public land in the state of Arizona. For example, 84% of the land is owned by the federal government. Now, this is legitimated in the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 says in part, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. Now, in your travels to the Bundy Ranch and your travels throughout your district, do you have a chance to go on government-owned property, and have you seen any forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, or other needful buildings?
Well, in my district, we have the military Marine base down in Yuma. We've got the Yuma Proving Grounds. We butt up against Luke Air Force Base. So there are some in those aspects in regards to military installations, which today what we would call our modern day forts. So there are some areas in there, but I think the issue that we're all coming back to is the taking of land that in most states would be part of our enabling causes that should be redirected back to the state. And that's why you see a huge difference from western states versus those east of the Mississippi, is that we're kind of considered the stepchildren of the federal government because the lands that everybody else owns, they're able to drive a tax revenue from, and we in the West are held captive. We were told by contract that we would get money for those lands from PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, and secure rural schools for our education. But that's hardly been supported. We're down to 60-some cents for every dollar we were promised. We get less than 1/2 of the dollars for our educational process than east of the Mississippi, so something's got to give. Either the federal government owns up to the contractual obligations that they've initiated, or they give our land back.
Understood. Thank you. That one of the frustrations that we see in the conservative community is, over and over and over, we see news items like this that come along and they seem to just vanish. So I just wanted to ask you, is this really over? As a member of the Oversight Committee, as well as the National Resources Committee, can we expect you and your congressional peers to follow up on this?
Well, we've already been doing this in natural resources, Mark. This conversation about the overreach of the federal government to rules, regulations from power plants on Native American lands and across our western slopes to relegating inactivity in our forests that allow them to burn and take away multiple use opportunities for the American citizen. We've already had these conversations. I think this will bring another point of reference to it. The problem that we have in government oversight is that we're riddled with scandals with this administration. So when I start talking to groups about the different scandals, I have to take my shoes and socks off. And sometimes that's kind of embarrassing. So this is a plight, but it comes down to a core principle, and that is the evaluation and application of justice. And I've made numerous comments that Washington is lawless, particularly when you look at its chief law enforcement officer, the Attorney General of the United States, picking and choosing the laws that he wants to enforce, lying to Congress, telling attorney generals from across the country, state attorney generals, not to enforce laws that they don't care for, and then, frankly, allowing treasonous attorneys who represented people like the Blind Sheikh to have commuted sentences when they should be in jail for the lifetime of that sentence.
Mm. Well, that's what you and your peers are doing in Congress. What can a concerned citizen do? Should they call your office? Should they call their own congressman, or just tweet about it into thin air, or make another Facebook group? What would you encourage concerned citizens to do at this point?
Well, first of all, I think that there's got to be a concerted effort, not just from the federal response, but from states and local municipalities. You know, so many of the districts that I serve are subjugated to having problems with the Forest Service, BLM, the Interior Department, and so what they need to do is make sure that local elected officials are orchestrated in a response to hold the federal government harmful in regards to their application of contractual obligations to the state. They also have to have a response from the state, from their state legislature or their lands department. So they need to make sure that those people that are in those positions are doing and have a plan in which to hold the federal government accountable in that aspect. And last but not least is that for those that are elected to federal government, they need to contact them, but elections have, consequences. I think the president made that comment when he was first elected, talking to Eric Cantor, Kevin McCarthy, and John Boehner. Well, what ends up having to happen is elections do have consequences. We have a big election coming up in November, and I think that what we need to do is have, those that are running to be able to stand up not only what they promised, but holding the Constitution up to the forefront, making sure that justice is given applicably and equally across the board.
I was watching on Twitter because that's a good way to keep your finger on the public opinion pulse, and I just kind of selected a few tweets. I want to read them and get your take on it, and use that as your opportunity to wrap it up. Janie Johnson at JJ Author tweets, "If you can get arrested for grazing cattle or fishing without a license, but not for being in the country illegally, you might be a liberal." And Lady Sanders at Lady Sanders Farm tweets, "Bundy Ranch shows that we can take charge if we pull together, whether we do it through social media or in person." Johnny Jones at Gamma_Ray239, "Where are the black helicopters stopping the human cattle jumping our fence?" Bill Perryman at Bill Perryman. This one I found interesting. Area code 702-346-5009. This is the number for a Pizza Hut that will deliver to Bundy Ranch protesters. You may order for delivery, $9.99 for a large 3-topping. Did you get any pizza, Congressman?
Well, I will tell you, it responds to that we are a country of individuals that is supposed to have liberties and freedoms, and then when we gather together on the common denominator, we can accomplish anything. I think that is key. But what we have to do is we get back to the principles that we have to have justice, and justice is a blindfolded lady that doesn't understand who she's giving justice to. She's just weighing the information equally, and then she gives it justly and mercifully. We have to make sure that the federal government is held accountable, and those that serve us have to be not only book smart but street smart. And too many times we've got people in those positions that are street stupid. There's an old adage from Native Americans, is walk a mile in my moccasins, and that's a key here, is to walk a mile in our moccasins from out here in the West. Our government is for the people, by the people, and with the people, not directed and dictated to them. And we've all created this mess we call the federal government, and it's going to take some time to get back. But I think with the resurgence of that personal freedom and liberties, when we all mash together and have a common denominator, first having justice, making sure that the freedoms are upheld, and make government accountable, I think we can accomplish anything. But that also tells you that if you're not playing at the table of politics, you will be served on the table of politics.
Well, Congressman, we again applaud you for your personal involvement in the Bundy Ranch issue and being a champion of our Constitution, and we thank you, and we thank you for joining us here on PJNET Radio now that you found some cell signal in traveling through your district. So thank you again, Congressman, and best of luck as you continue to represent the people.
Well, thank you so very much, and anybody that has ideas, please contact us with your ideas. Who knows? Maybe you're the one whose light shines and liberates others.